On the latest Widnes Rugby Chat, we discuss all the fallout from the Swinton game and hear from Widnes coach Allan Coleman. Welcome to episode 5 of the Widnes Rugby Chat podcast for 2024 with myself, James Gordon and Mike Parsons. Well, plenty happened both during and after Widnes' game against Swinton at the weekend, and we'll break down all of that in this week's episode. First of all, though, let's hear from Widnes coach Allan Coleman, who I caught up with in the immediate aftermath of the game at Swinton. I should say at this point that the interview is from before the big talking point of the evening around Nick Gregson went public. Myself and Mike will go through that a bit later on in this episode, but for now, let's hear from Allan, who talked about Widnes' form, the state of play with the dual registration partnership with Warrington, moving on with getting new players in at the club, especially after the injury woes from the weekend. And I also asked if he could explain just why Widnes seems to have a dip in form at this time of the year every season. Allan Coleman, pretty much everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong this afternoon for you.
Yeah, I thought first half we were good. We were smart, professional, kept hold of the ball. Probably should have had more points on board, to be honest. A bit dumb at times near the line, probably to get carried away. But we're coming at half time, we're comfortable. We did have a worry about obviously losing 2 middles and a winger. You know, we was worried about just having one interchange. So we just spoke about, keeping hold of the ball, being smart, keeping hold of the ball. First couple of sets, we throw the ball everywhere and we lose it, and they get back in game. And we said and we spoke, if they get a sniff, they'll come. And the back 20 minutes we'll struggle because of interchange. We had nothing. We had active, I had Lloyd Roby. But we've got to be smarter. And it's okay me saying this now. We've got actions. We've got to do actions with it. There's nobody more gutted than me today. But I think I can take defeat. It's just the way it's the word I'm looking for. How costly it's going to cost us this. We've lost 6 players today. And we've just not got 6 in reserves.
How much of a blow, you were dealing with that at half time, and then Liam Bent goes down first few minutes of the second half, and you could almost see that everyone was trying to figure out where they were playing. How much did that even add to the blows that you'd already had?
It just flattened the lads, I think. Sam Wild and Danny Langtree are really aggressive back rows and get good thingy. We lose Danny Langtree, and then we lose. We put Nick Gregson there, then we lose him. We put Louis Brogan there, he ends up on wing because he's on one leg with no subs. And with having no subs, I should have brought him off and played with 12. But being the lad he is, he said no, I'll carry on. And they were just targets. And they were smart second half. They raised with momentum. But the worry is for me is his bodies now.
I saw you were signalling for the drop goal just before half time, and they sort of made a meal of that, and Jack Owens put it wrong. But then at the start of the second half, you had the pressure on the Swinton line through the interception. Did you think there was a penalty there?
It was offside, clearly offside. Tom Gilmore chases the ref down and said they're offside, and you get them, you don't get them. I'm not one who blames anybody. We've got to look at ourselves more than anything. And listen, I get the fans will be gutted. So am I. I'm gutted. Just got to stick with us though. We're not different people here. We're the same people who started the season with the great attitude and the right attitude. What I want is I just want to get everyone fit if I can, which helps. And I'm not looking for excuses. They deserved it today. But we've just got to regroup somehow and get some bodies in. We've got to freshen things up a little bit.
You'll obviously miss out Liam Kirk and Liam Bent next week. What's the early diagnosis of the others that went off today?
Langers won't play, 100%. Nick Gregson won't play. Ollie Brooks won't play. That's 5 definite players. Louis Brogan might not play depending on injury, and obviously he's a lead player, so it's really important. We do some digging. I shouldn't say disappointed, but it's not nice when your dual reg club sends 2 players to a team what you're battling against, which is not ideal for us really, when we need a bit of help. So that's a bit upsetting.
I was going to ask actually about Okoro, of course, who's signed for Warrington this season from Bradford. Is he someone who's been offered to you at all? Or?
He got offered a couple of weeks ago. But we was okay then, and I tried to stick with the squad in hand. Last week we asked for some this week, unfortunately there wasn't any, they said, and then obviously the 2 come to here, so that's something we have to work on with them and probably communicate a little better maybe on our half. I don't know, it's just we're desperate now for bodies, desperate.
Obviously you've lost Kevin Dixon and Ant Walker last few weeks. Is there anything in the pipeline for replacing them? I know obviously you've got Lee Brogan in.
Yeah, we've got Brogan in. Listen, and I know people are probably surprised with that, but what you've got to understand is if I've got a player at my club who really doesn't want me there because he's not there next year, I'm better off not having that player there. And I know, you spoke with some players and they wanted to stay. Yeah, everybody wants to stay. Hopefully it shows it's a good club. But next year was our choice not to stay. So then, do they want to stay the rest of the year? No, they don't. So that's a different answer from what I've been told. And Kieran, we had 3 healthy wingers. And Kieran, unfortunately, wasn't there. And everyone knows our first choice is Mike Butt and Ince, just because of what they bring in carries and efforts. And Ollie's got his chance and he's took it. But unfortunately, he's been injured. So, yeah, it's cost us a bit.
Is Ryan Ince fit to play? Is he all right?
Yeah,
so
him
and Max Roberts are okay?
Yeah, they'll come back in next week. So them two will come in. Callum Field will come in. So he's fit to go next week. And then hopefully, if Brogan's fit, that'll be an extra one. But if not, we'll be. I'll be ringing quite a few people up tomorrow or tonight and begging ball out, I'm afraid.
So that's basically you're going to spend the week on the phone pretty much. There's not.
Yeah. Well, tonight I'll be on it straight away, and let's not beat about the bush. If you're Dewsbury, you're coming thinking let's have a go at these. But we've showed today. Let's be honest. As much as it's doom and gloom, that first half we could have been 20 points up. We was well in control. We was never looked like being out of control of the game. But second half, it took its toll. Bodies took its toll. Energy levels just went completely flat, and we had no good ball. They just kept us down there, which they did the job. So no qualms from me. Effort areas, I'm quite happy. It's just decision making I'm a bit disappointed with.
I appreciate it's your first year at Widnes, but there seems to be a pattern with Widnes over the last few years of starting seasons really well and then falling off at this stage of the season. You've got 1 win in 7 now. What can you put that down to? Because obviously it's a question the fans ask me, especially all the time. Why is it the case?
I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know. I don't really focus on that. We agreed something at the beginning about staying level. So we never got carried away when we were 4 from 4. We never got carried away when we were second. We just stayed level. And when you game beat, you've got to stay at level. I remember speaking to Matty Pete last year, and he said his philosophy, and we try to embrace that, and I believe in it strongly, is even if you're winning, don't get carried away with your wins. But if you're losing and you're on back-to-back losses or 3 or 4, don't get carried away with losing. Just stay level, stay believing what you think, and something will trigger that. And that's what we've got to do. I know we've played a lot of clubs away around us, and everyone's coming chasing us now, and there's a bit of a gap forming. But them clubs won't be looking forward to coming to Widnes, so we've just got to keep believing in us and staying level and always believing what we're capable about. Because you watch all games, James, and I've no doubt that when we turn 80 minutes into performance, somebody's getting a good hiding, and that's 100% going to happen. When it happens, I don't know, but we're not a bad team. I know that. We just need to believe a little bit more in ourselves.
Does it put a bit of pressure on, or even more pressure on next week, this little run that you've been on, or do you just take each week as it?
Yeah, and we've got as a club and as a group of players handle that pressure. It's like I've just said in there, I won't tell you what I've said to players, but I've said I'll go out and front it, I'll take the blunt, I'll take the blame, but there's only so long I can do that. So you've got to, be man enough and believe and be proud enough that say, we've got to change it, because we can't keep expecting him going out, excusing, because I'm not putting my name to that today. I didn't ask them to do that second half. I asked them to start the game in a certain way and they didn't. So I'm not looking to blame the players. What I'm saying is I'll keep fronting it, but then there comes a point where you can't front it because I'm taking blame for something I'm not instructing. Do you know what I mean? So we've got to start listening a little bit more and start following direct messages.
So, Mike, that was Allan Coleman's reaction to the Swinton defeat. What are your immediate thoughts?
Oh, well, just really deflated, to be honest. I thought after last week, things wouldn't get worse. It ended up being a bit of a car crash, to be honest. 12-0 up at half time, and in fairness, I thought we was in control. I didn't think we was particularly playing well. I thought we were making some errors, but so was they. But when we was in good ball, we looked threatening, and we got over the line a couple of times. And at half time, we did look comfortable, but then the injuries kept snowballing, didn't they? And I think the game breaking moment really, and I know there's been references to it being offside. Me personally, I didn't get a good view of it from where I was stood to see where how quick that defensive line had moved up. I didn't get a clear view of that, but it was just head in hands moment, because when you're running out of interchanges and there's warning of your 18th man having to come on the bench, you want to complete, you want to stay down there as long as possible, and then the interception and Reece Williams flies up the wing and touches down, and then that's followed up then with an error from Jack Owens where he's dropped the ball with nobody round him, and that's 12 points where essentially you've gifted it him, and when you're running low on troops and the target and the task is to get through the game, and you've done that, and then the forwards and how direct he was playing. I think they even had a forward in the halves, Lewis Hall, who, to be fair, had a really good game, and when we was losing troops, he become really effective. It just took over, and then obviously at the end, what we seen, it was more of an effort trying to work out who was playing where. I think the two fit back rowers the club had are in the centres. You've got, I think Jack Owens might have even slotted in at centre at one moment. You got Lloyd Roby jumping on. You've got Props playing back row. It just ended up a bit of a mess, really. And I did a little bit feel for Allan Coleman, really, when it got to that stage. It's like, what can you do, really? It was just really, he referenced it. There was a serious consideration of playing on with 12 men. So yeah.
And well, I mean, I guess Sam Brooks being sin-binned towards the end probably didn't help that situation, because you would have basically been playing with 11 when he went off. I spoke briefly to Tom Gilmore after the game, and he suggested to me that the referee had called them or called somebody offside from the scrum, and so the reason why he threw the pass out was because he effectively thought there was an advantage being played. Widnes trapped the ball at the back of the scrum, as some teams do now. The loose forward trapped it with a foot, and it looked like Swinton had broke from the scrum, and that was the reasoning for that. But I think probably the signs were there that perhaps things weren't too right. I thought Widnes made a meal of the play before half time, where it was a clear setup for a drop goal situation. Allan Coleman was on the sideline telling the players that's what he wanted them to do. And then I think Tom Gilmore, I mean, to be fair, it was half a chance. He dummied and nearly got over, but he gets wrapped up on the last tackle. Jack Owens misses the drop goal. That could have been 13-0. Maybe the psychological effect of having that extra point might have made the second half a little bit better for Widnes. I think clearly they needed half time to come so they could regroup. I said in the interview that the fact Liam Bent then goes down early in that second half, and I mean, to be fair, it took I don't know what the protocol is, to be honest. I don't know how long they have to wait before they can activate the 18th man, but it did feel like it took a while to get Lloyd Roby out there. And I also think it must be very difficult when the game's ongoing and you're trying to make a change where ultimately a lot of players are going to have to be moved around. But yeah, it was a tough one. Of course, you would have heard in the interview there that Liam Bent, Danny Lantry, Nick Gregson, Ollie Brooks, and Liam Kirk all basically be out next week. The only plus side is that you've at least got Callum Field coming back, Ryan Ince, Max Roberts. Of course, Matt Fleming didn't play because he was banned yesterday. It was a very tough watch, certainly that second half. I think even when it was 16-12, you could only see Widnes scoring one, if at all, but they never really got close to that. I think what I found interesting that, and Allan Coleman referenced this, and I noticed Chris Hamilton sort of mentioned it in his weekly ramblings on LinkedIn or whatever, and here's the line that he wrote. Allan Coleman made it clear that the players did not carry out his instructions in that second half, and he obviously was not happy with what happened. It seems to me that there's a little bit of friction or a little bit of frustration there that the players, for whatever reason, haven't carried out what instructions they were given. Do we put that down to the fact that there was a lot of disruption in the team, or is that something to be a little bit worried about?
I think it's really concerning. Got to call it as it is. We've been really optimistic on this podcast, since we've been doing it, of like, maybe next week. But the reality of the situation is, using words like that, clearly something's not right, and we've lost. We've won 1 in 7 now, so there is clearly an issue. For me, yesterday it was frustrating to watch the game management, and like I referred to, just when you're gifting 12 points to a team and you're in the state you are absolutely asking for trouble. And for me, when that game went to 12-12, there was only one side winning the game. One side had all the momentum, and the other one was, well, essentially it was the walking wounded, wasn't it? We was hamstrung. And I think, in fairness to Allan, he's a straight talking guy, and I think he'll be having a conversation behind closed doors and essentially saying we're not hiding behind the excuses of us being down to, 13, 12 men, if you include Lewis Brogan hobbling around. He will be focusing on what we haven't carried through. I think game management and the individual errors, you don't set a team up, do you, to go out there and make them kind of mistakes, and we've been doing it time and time again. We spoke a lot last week in the Batley game about the size, but let's have it right. Our completion was on the floor. You have no right to win a game with a completion like that. And the game management again against Swinton, for me, it wasn't good enough, and we need to fix it up, and fast.
Yeah, another line in the Chris Hamilton statement, which I tweeted, that people might have seen. Thanks to the fans that travelled. But believe me when I say we are making progress and will continue to do so. We need you with us. Now, I don't dispute the sentiment of that, but I think the reality of the situation is, over the last few weeks, Widnes' season has sort of not collapsed, but it certainly dived a little bit. I think the run of games that they were on before the last two, you could say fair enough, but we talked before this run of Batley, Swinton and Dewsbury, thinking, look, if Widnes can win them 3 games, they're going to be probably quite solid in the playoffs. You're now at the situation where you're heading into playing bottom of the league on Sunday, and you're sort of worried that you're there for the taking. Featherstone and the teams behind are starting now to reel Widnes in. They've completely lost that cushion they had in the playoff places. They're 4 points behind anyone above them. And then we've seen the exit of Ant Walker. Allan obviously listens to the podcast, which is great because he referenced the interview with Ant Walker last week. But Kieran Dixon leaving as well. Now, I think the Walker one was a little bit of a head scratch for me. The Dixon one, I'm not as, what's the right word? I'm not as worried isn't the right word, but I don't know what I'm trying to say. He's not being played because ultimately Mike Butt and Ryan Ince or Ollie Brooks have been better than him. And so him disappearing isn't the end of the world. However, for me, he's one of them few players who had a little bit of X factor about him. I think the reality of the situation perhaps is that he doesn't do as well with those tough early tackle carries that, say, a Mike Butt does. And perhaps that's why he's not the man for Allan Coleman moving forward. I think them 2 players have gone out the door, but we've not seen anybody. I know Brogan came in on loan, Keenan Brand's there as well, but in terms of making progress, at the moment, it feels like there's been a stall, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, if we're focusing on just them 2 plays and the decisions behind it, right now, I think one Walker, I think personally, from my opinion, a massive part of that was getting Lewis Brogan in, and it was an opportunity to bring in a player that Allan's, really fond of and really trusts. He's got injured in what happened on Sunday, and then Kieran Dixon, for me, I think you need 3 wingers in a squad, and then your fourth kind of winger is somebody who, like a Matt Fleming, for example, he can fill in on the wing if you need to, but can play another position. And I think as well, it's probably one of the easiest positions to slot somebody in on loan. But again, after Sunday, you've gone from 4 wingers to 2 with a click of your fingers. And I think from a fan's point of view, certainly for people who pay into Widnes VIPs, we all absolutely respect that there's a philosophy and there's a direction that the club do really want to go in, and we absolutely trust that, and that's absolutely fine. But if you're getting rid of 2 permanent players and no permanent players are coming in, then if you're paying into a squad builder, so to speak, that will put some people off, because there will be natural question marks of, well, I'm paying into this, but we're releasing players and we're not getting any permanent fixtures in. And I think that's the side of it that at the moment fans are questioning and want to be understood. Now, I could be jumping the gun here.
Well, I mean,
we could be talking in about a week or two's time, and we brought them bodies in and permanent signings, and it's on the agenda. But right now, I think, speaking to a number of people who pay into the VIPs, that's kind of their concern at the moment.
I think my main not issue. I don't have a massively strong issue with it. I think my main assessment, if you like, with it is that, okay, so you've got two players that were basically told they're not wanted for next year, right? That's ultimately what's happened, and that's fair enough. For whatever reason, they've then decided, well, we want to leave now. We don't want to see out our contract. We want to move now because a club elsewhere is giving them the opportunity to play. I guess the issue is, why is that not happening in reverse? So we hear of Widnes being linked to players for next season. Dec Patton, as an example, and I heard a little bit of a murmur that maybe he's trying to back out of his deal with Widnes next season. Don't know how true that is. That's just what I heard on the grapevine. But take Dec Patton as an example. If he, as has been rumoured, is signing for Widnes next season, and he then becomes available from Swinton mid-season, why is he then going to Featherstone for 6 months or whatever, rather than just coming to Widnes straight away? Because Ant Walker, as an example, he isn't leaving Widnes to go to Whitehaven for 6 months. He's leaving Widnes to go to Swinton, because that's where he's going for the next couple of seasons. And I would imagine probably what's happening now is Patton's probably at Featherstone thinking, oh, it's all right here, I'd quite fancy to stay. And maybe, and I don't know, as I say, take it with a pinch of salt, I don't know the ins and outs of what's going on and whatnot, but there's every chance that might be what's happening. And I think that's the thing that's difficult to get your head round.
Yeah.
Likewise, we talk about this May 1st and the contract situation. I think on the Facebook page on Sunday night, we had people saying the contract situation doesn't help. But the reality is every club is in the same boat. So every club goes through this. And for whatever reason at the moment, whatever Widnes are doing or whatever Widnes' approach to it isn't quite working out as good as it can be for Widnes, in my opinion.
No, well, definitely not, because, like you say, as far, Dec Patton is the prime example, isn't it? That will make sense. We've got 2 half-backs, essentially. We're not too sure what Lloyd Roby's actually classed as. That would have been a healthy boost, but like you say, certainly forwards now. You would like to think if there's any possibilities of forcing somebody's arm, of somebody coming in the other way, now is the time to do it and get some benefit.
Let's talk about the dual red situation. Warrington, Widnes have had a partnership with Warrington this season. It is still active. It's not being cancelled. I've had a few people ask me about that. As far as I'm aware, Warrington have offered players this season. Widnes they've taken a couple at times, but clearly Allan Coleman's philosophy is he wants to play his own players. I have no problem with that whatsoever. I think where there's clearly now becoming some friction is that now Allan's asking for players. Warrington are saying we haven't got any, but then there was 2 Warrington players playing for Swinton yesterday. Like Okoro being a prime example of someone who probably could have added something to Widnes yesterday. Now, I don't think it's necessarily a Widnes thing or even a Warrington thing, to be honest, but I just the way players are moved around these days for me, I just it doesn't really sit too well with me. I mean, even Brogan, to be fair, Brogan has played for Swinton this season, on loan or dual reg, whatever it is from Lee. Keenan Brand's played against Swinton for Bradford this season. For me, I think it just completely devalues what it means to play for a club when players are basically just being farmed out willy-nilly, it almost seems at the moment. And yeah, I'm just not comfortable with it, to be honest. And I don't really know where a club like Widnes goes from here with it.
No, I mean, for me again, like you've just said there, we haven't had a successful dual reg partner. So certainly since we've dropped out a Super League. For me, I think the right way to go it's to try and field as many of your own players as possible. The dual registration system, I hate. I think go back to minimum month loans. I think if somebody gets called back, you get a small fee put in there or whatever, or clause. But yeah, for me, I'd just rather leave dual reg because it's so complicated. It's unbelievable. Like, essentially, what I think's happened with Warrington is we've started the season and we wanted to go with our own players, which is absolutely fine. And then their players, they're obviously quite rightly want to get their players playing elsewhere who aren't playing for experience, game time, minutes. And then you're coming calling then, and they're probably like, well, hang on 1 minute. You want them now, but when we wanted you to have them, you wouldn't. So you're stuck in that catch-22. Do you know what I mean?
And we're talking about what's best for Widnes, but ultimately Warrington are looking after what's best for Warrington.
Absolutely.
And I think my approach to it, again, I think they should, if they're having loan deals, they should be a minimum 1 month. I've always thought the way that dual red should work is that before the start of the season, they nominate X number of players, however many that is. Say it's 4, say it's 6, I don't know. And they basically say, right, these 4 to 6 players are going to be dual registered to Warrington and Widnes this season, but they can't be dual registered anywhere else. They can only be loaned somewhere else. And I thought that was what Widnes were almost trying to do at the start. Lucas Green and Tom Whitehead played almost the full pre-season with Widnes, and then I think Green, my perception is that maybe it was deemed he wasn't good enough, maybe. But Whitehead, we've not seen anything of. He's not really played he's not really been around Warrington, whether he's had an injury or whatever. But it's just for whatever reason. I think, and it's awkward for Widnes because Widnes are in a club, with all due respect, Swinton are happy to lap up whatever players get sent to them as a championship team, whereas you still feel like Widnes are still in the position where they don't want to be seen to be relying on it because it alienates portions of the fan base. But you're in this situation where you're desperate for players, and the club that you're supposed to have partnered with is effectively making your opponent stronger. That's probably not a great. It's probably not a sign of a great working relationship, to be honest. And I wouldn't be surprised if Widnes have a different dual reg partner next season. To be honest,
yeah.
And I think it's probably a shame. It's a shame in some ways for Warrington that if they had a couple of young centres, they probably would have played every week for Widnes this season. And it's just probably happened that Warrington don't have the players in the positions that would. Like Harthill, who played for Swinton yesterday, he's a decent player. He's never getting a look in the Widnes team.
No. Because
Widnes have got 2 80-minute hookers who are durable, play every week. He's never getting in the Widnes team. And so, yeah, Allan again mentioned it in the interview. He's trying to get players in for this week. Hopefully, he'll be able to get Max Wood or someone like that from Warrington to boost the pack, because that's that's ultimately what Widnes need.
I'll be honest, James, I don't think we'll see another player from Warrington from now to the end of the season. I think we'll be shopping elsewhere. I think it'll be from your Lees, possibly St Helens. I think it'll be that. I think that relationship looks quite fractured, to be honest. I think we'll be looking at maybe Brett Bailey maybe coming back if Saints would be happy with that. That's a possibility. It's certainly in the forwards we're looking at. I think we can put a decent back line out against Dewsbury, but it's trying to shape up what that forward rotation is going to look like, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to a point. Although I would make the case that Widnes are desperate for a strike centre. To be honest, I think one of the reasons Widnes' attacks looked a bit blunt recently is because they've not really got any threat out wide in terms like Joe Edge being injured. He's a good example of a sort of, if he's running at you wide and he gets on the outside, he's going to cause problems. Fleming's not really that sort of player on the other side. And with all, Rodri Lloyd's a good player, but he should be in the forwards. He's more of a defensive centre than an attacking one. He'll probably point out his try scoring record to me actually in defence of that. But I'd much rather have Rodri Lloyd in the back row than at centre. But I suppose.
Sorry,
say again.
I do agree. I'm just thinking more of how many forwards are we going to have available for Dewsbury in the short term? Absolutely, in the long term, I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean more as in like how many loans we can get and how many forwards essentially have we got available for this week.
Yeah. Well, speaking of forwards, there was unless you've been under a rock, you won't have avoided the fallout following the Swinton game, which all stemmed from a post on Twitter made by Nick Gregson, who referenced what appears to be an image from the Swinton, or an image of the Widnes team pinned up in the Swinton dressing room, which has a photo of Nick Gregson with a noose around his neck with the words "bully him." There was shouts during the game of basically target Nick Gregson's weak shoulder. He's had problems with the shoulder. Ultimately, he's been injured and he's out for, well, the early prognosis is he's possibly out for the season. But ultimately, that gained a lot of traction last night, resulted in a statement from Widnes saying that they were going to report it to the RFL. There was then a statement from Swinton essentially denying the whole thing or refuting the incident, and it was all a little bit unsavoury. I've actually noticed that Swinton have removed their initial statement, which was posted on Twitter last night. Now, I'll ask you in a sec, Mike, but my initial... I thought the Swinton statement was poor. Now, I feel like there's not a... I'm trying to be careful here. I don't feel like there's a strong defence for the picture is out of order, 100%. Like the noose thing, whatever. But I think things like messaging like that in the changing room probably goes on more than we're aware of, right? The noose thing, completely, that's unacceptable. Running at his shoulder or identifying a weak point in a player, again, I don't have a massive issue with that as long as it's not done as a deliberate to injure that player. And that, I think that's where the grey line is here, is that is he saying run at his shoulder to injure it, or is he saying run at his shoulder because you might be able to break the tackle if you run at that shoulder? That is me playing devil's advocate and giving the alternative view. And I think that is why I think Swinton's statement was very poor, because they came out and said, we refute this. But what they should have basically said was, they should have said they acknowledge it, not perhaps apologise, well, maybe apologise for the noose and the way it looked. But because they sort of came out and said, we refute all it was almost like they were saying, you're talking absolute nonsense. Whereas clearly there's plenty of evidence to suggest that it was all there. And I think that's what made the situation a lot worse than it might have been. If Swinton had just turned around and said, yeah, look, that is a bit out of order that we've got that picture up. We didn't go out there to hurt Nick Gregson. Yeah, the coaching staff identified that as a weak point, so we went for it. But the fact that they've basically doubled down on the whole thing and said, no, you're talking rubbish. I think that's probably added more fuel to the fire. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, absolutely is. I think you summed it up quite well there. I think if a player's hobbling in back play or you've got hold of the ball and somebody's injured, to throw the ball wide, to not to hurt that player, but to take advantage of a gap that player might be leaving is absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Where the plot thickens for me, where it doesn't sit right with me at all, and I do think the book should get through at them a little bit. I've never really heard anything like this come to light all too often. I can't really think of one at all, not like this. So it's hard to say what the punishment's going to be. But for me, the message is getting shouted on to target somebody's shoulder defensively as well. That is chiseling away at somebody. That is physically causing somebody harm that they quite clearly have a strong understanding it's going to aggravate an injury or, an old injury come back. And the thing that's kind of been lost in all this for me as well, and look, this is putting 2 and 2 together, making 5 a bit as well, but potentially them same tactics could have been put over before the game to Danny Langtry as well. Now, unfortunately, with Danny Langtry, that could be his career done. So and the amount of injuries that was picked up, I think that there's a way and there's a line, and it was massively overstepped. Now, as for the statement, it looked like it was written on the back of a fag packet. To be honest, it was just not good enough. You've got state of mind in the game. You've got the new tackle laws coming in the future, and there's absolutely was no understanding of that. No sat there and thought about Nick Gregson in the moments after it. What's he quite rightly mentioned on social media last night, that's potentially stopping him from getting a contract next year. But there was no acknowledgement of that. So that was absolutely terrible. And my final point, kind of for me, where it'd be quite interesting, not that it's any of their business, I suppose, but St. Helens have been dual registration with Swinton for the past couple of years. If I'm St. Helens are a fantastic club, really well run, very successful. Do you really want your players being sent into an environment like that with tactics like that and as a breeding ground for your players? I don't think so. So I think that'll be really interesting to look at how maybe St. Helens deal with it as well, to be honest.
I think the backdrop of the injuries probably doesn't help Swinton's cause. Now, there's no evidence to suggest that, or as far as I'm aware, there's no evidence to suggest that the injuries Widnes picked up in the game were anything to do with Swinton's tactics. Someone might prove me wrong, but I think the problem is because Widnes have picked up these injuries automatically, because you've seen this approach.
Yep.
You automatically put, and I've seen plenty of tweets doing the same. You automatically put 2 and 2 together, and come up with 5 maybe. There's question mark. You could raise Danny Langtry had a shoulder injury when Widnes signed him. You could argue, have Widnes done enough to get Danny Langtry and Nick Gregson's shoulder issues sorted? Have they played on too long with them? They are other questions that you could ask. But the bottom line is that it was an unsavoury. It's a very unsavoury incident. There's been a handful of people trying to defend it, but I think it's had widespread condemnation across rugby league. I don't doubt that there's nasty messages or targeting that does go on in the game. But as you say, the fact that we've never seen anything like this come to light suggests that this goes beyond the line of what is regarded as acceptable.
I totally agree. Like I say, I think we'd have heard or seen this kind of thing before if it was something that happens all the time. Obviously, like you say, it is a physical game. There is, motivational talk in the changing rooms of going out and belting and whacking people, and that's absolutely fine. I've got no issues with that whatsoever. But what you're saying there, like a picture like that, and also there was another picture that was doing the rounds on social media of another team as well. So it clearly happens on a regular basis. For me, that is just not a culture I'd be proud of. If we was doing that, I'd be saying exactly the same thing, like what's going on here. That is not the way to motivate your team to win a game. Not at all.
I don't know whether you saw this in the game. I saw it, and then I seen somebody else mention it on Twitter, which is why I'm going to mention it here. There was an incident in the first half where Jake Spedding went down in a tackle. There was nothing wrong with the tackle. He'd sort of made a break and then got caught, and he was dragged down. And I don't know whether he landed face first on what was a hard surface, and whether he just got like a stray boot in the face. And play had to stop because he needed some sort of treatment, whether he had a little bloodied nose or something like that. The doctor comes on, whatever. In the end, he had to go off because, I don't know, they were trying to put the blockers up his nose and they couldn't. The Swinton coach, Alan Kilshaw, I've had some dealings with him, he's perfectly fine. He was shouting about HIA, 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 and there appears to have been some confusion over that incident because at the time I was like, and I must admit, I don't know 100%, I don't think anybody really knows 100% what the rules are with regards to that, but it was almost like the doctor never signalled for HIA because I don't think it was just the fact that he'd cut his nose and he needed treatment. Now, the concussion board was shown at the time, but then later on in the match, there was some confusion. You might notice the game was stopped a little bit because the Swinton assistant, I think, was having a bit of a set to with the match commissioner on the far side. And whether that was an argument over the interchange where Swinton had thought that was a HIA interchange, but actually it counted as an interchange. But I just wanted to mention that because I feel like that adds a little bit to the culture of maybe us against the world or trying to squeeze as much out of the rules as you can for your own benefit. I certainly thought, I was very close to the Swinton coach. I certainly thought he probably gave off the characteristics of a coach that was in a fairly desperate situation. I think he was a bit under pressure. But yeah, clearly there's something needs pulling in there, I think, and sorting out, because I don't think you'll last very long if that's your approach week in, week out.
No, absolutely not. And you know what as well, I the Swinton fans, over social media have had a bit of backlash over it, and the comments that I've read and stuff, the Swinton fans, the majority of them have said, that is not what we stand for. So I just like to say as well, it's no reflection on the fans or even, I suppose, the club either. It's a well run club. I think, like you say, for me, they just need to, certainly the coaching staff, they need to get the priorities right, and the gamesmanship, it massively crossed the line.
We'll move on from this shortly, but just to add a final point, I think the club dragged themselves into it by issuing the statement that they did, and I think that is the problem, that perhaps that's where they've made it worse for themselves than they need to. I'm not saying for 1 second that they should have just sacked the coach there and then. No. I don't think that's what they should have done, but I think that they've not helped themselves with the way they've approached. Anyway,
sorry, just to finish up with that. Sorry, when I say the club, I mean the fans. But reflection on the fans. Sorry, not the club and the playing staff. I mean the fans. It's not reflection.
Ultimately, it'll all come out in the wash. There'll be an investigation in it. There'll be an investigation to it, and of course, we all hope that Nick Gregson gets fit again as soon as possible, and hopefully we will see him in a Widnes shirt again. Moving forward then, it's Dewsbury next week, and ultimately that was almost looking like, well, it was looking like a home banker that for Widnes, but the way the situation is at the moment, it now all of a sudden becomes one of a source of anxiety, perhaps.
Yeah. I think the back line in my head, I think we can put a recognised back line out next week, providing we can get sufficient forwards in. For me, I think Alan's biggest job of the week is the psychological factor of it, of calming everybody down. Maybe we do need to strip it back a little bit, get back to basics. Bit of a John Kay way, so to speak, as in like get through your sets, get in the opposition's half, strip it back, and then play from there. And then if we do post points, which I'm sure we will if we spend enough time down there and keep them on the rack, that's when you can grow into a game and then maybe fall back then on maybe the slightly more expansive way of playing that we've seen at times this year when it's come off. I think for me, it is kind of going to be a week at the club where they're just going to have to bring themselves back together, calm down, and restore some confidence.
Looking at the other games this week, and just trying to see where there might be some opportunities for Widnes. Featherstone are away at Halifax. Halifax were well beaten by Sheffield last week. Featherstone they had a bit of a slow start to the season, but they seem to have steadied the ship a little bit and started to tick into gear. York play Doncaster, so they're the 7th and 8th place teams at the moment. Batley play Barrow, so there's a few games between teams that are down there. Then Whitehaven play Toulouse, and Bradford play Wakefield. So if Widnes win, you'd expect maybe Wakefield to beat Bradford. So if Widnes win, they'd be up within 2 points of Bradford. Of course, play Bradford in a few weeks' time. And then at worst, if Widnes win, they're still going to be 2 points, possibly 3 clear of 7th. So although it's a bit of a bad run at the moment, all is certainly not lost in terms of where Widnes are in the table and the possibilities of reaching the top 6.
Absolutely, and it's absolute madness to say that you're still in a good position with 1 win in 7, but the reality is if we can get that job done next week and you can build a bit more momentum and you can kind of get over this stuttery patch, I suppose that's the beauty, isn't it, of starting fast. You can afford for a dip in form, a couple of poor performances, but time is running out, and 1 win in 7, that can't go to 1 win in 10. It just can't.
And I think that's partly where you're a little frustrated. If Widnes had won the last 2 games, they'd be up with Toulouse and Bradford on 19 points, and they'd have had a 6-point cushion on the playoff places ahead of this Dewsbury game. That was the position we hoped Widnes would be in. As it is, they've not managed to do it. But what are we now? 14 games out of 26. There's 12 games left. As Allan Coleman alluded to in the interview earlier, Widnes have played a lot of the tough away. They've already played Sheffield away, they've played Toulouse away, they've played Bradford away, played Featherstone away, played York away. So the perception is that they've got them teams to come to Widnes. But of course, them coming to Widnes, you've got to be in good form to welcome them, and that's the issue that Widnes now face themselves with at the moment. Before we sign off, let's talk a little bit about the Widnes Vips. I should have asked you actually when you were talking about it. You tell me what the philosophy is, Mike.
Sorry, what was that, James?
The Widnes Vips. I was going to talk about the quiz night and stuff like that, but you mentioned before about the philosophy of the raising money and stuff like that, and I'd like to understand what you perceive that to be.
Is it like from a fan's perspective of what you should go towards to, or Vips as a total?
Well, both.
I really enjoyed the quiz night. I think, starting there really, the volunteers, the time, the effort that they all put in the different roles. It's not paid. I think it's fantastic. I think the way the Championship is, certainly, even some Super League clubs. It's essential something like that is in place, and the roles that them volunteers take up, it's gold. It's so valuable. I think for me, where like I was touching on earlier, I think that's where it does become a little bit frustrating sometimes for fans is when you've got loans coming in left, right, and centre, and your money's going towards a squad builder, but then no permanent signings are coming in. That's where some fans can get frustrated. And I kind of get it, James. You know what I mean? I can't disagree with that.
Is the understanding that the money definitely goes on players? Because I see I'm a paying member of Widnes Vips. I put my money in, whatever, not a massive amount, but I'm there to support it as best as I can. And I get the emails that say, right, we've transferred £30,000 to the club. Is the understanding that is purely just for players, or is that money going into just the general Widnes Vikings pot?
From my understanding, and this is just me, so maybe somebody could correct me, but it goes to the wages of players and anything to do with recruitment and retention to make the squad bigger and better. So that's my understanding of it, and there is a lot of people who I see on a week-to-week basis that are also under the same impression.
So yeah, they've got a website. I think it's widnesvips.co.uk, widnesvips.co.uk. You can sign up and contribute however much a month you want, starting from a £5. I did get the email. They've raised a decent amount. It clearly fills the void left by the closing down of Vikings Quids In. And there was a quiz night last week, which was, I think it was open to anyone, but primarily to Vips members. And there was a few familiar faces there. Gavin Dodd was there, Lucas Onyango. He was on my quiz team, actually. Steve McCormack was there. Matty Fozzard actually came as well. I think he won the quiz, to be honest. But it was an enjoyable night put together. And yeah, certainly it'd be nice to see more people coming out in support of those sorts of things.
I'd say I think it was a really successful night. We really enjoyed it, and it's valuable funds going into the pot. And there was a good number of people as well who I think signed up. Actually, you was right in saying it was open to more than just members, and there was a few more membership sign-ups as well. So long may that continue. And like I say, the volunteers run it fantastically well. And also, if you see Anne-Marie in the bridge suite or any of the other volunteers, they are absolutely transparent. So if you are thinking of signing up, maybe chat to Anne-Marie, and any questions you may have, she'll be open and honest and answer them for you.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, and I'm happy to go to war on this. I always had a few reservations about how transparent Vicky was at times. That's not me suggesting anything untoward's gone on, but certainly Widnes Vips is very transparent. In fact, I think I had an email the other day which effectively outlined their financial status and how much money they've brought in, how much money they've given to the club, and how much money they've got in the pot. So you can't ask for anything more than that from a fan-run, fan-led, fan-supported organisation. So big thumbs up from me for that one. Before we go, I suppose we better read out some people's comments. I know we chucked out a couple of things on the Facebook page in the week. And it's interesting to look at what people are saying. Ben says, our forwards are made of glass. Kurt goes off after 10 seconds, not for the first time this season. It's not normal to have this many injuries, surely, especially in one game. What's going on? Thoughts on that, Mike?
First and foremost, I'd say that's a bit harsh, certainly on the Liam Kirk one, with it being a HIA. It was a hard, fair tackle, and if somebody's concussed, then that is just unfortunate. I don't think Liam would have got up from that tackle and thought, I don't fancy this, and wandered off. But at the same time, I think we've covered earlier in the podcast that the two injuries in that specific game, there are question marks over how they was caused, what happened. I suppose we'll never really, unless you're in the Swinton changing rooms, nobody will ever really know. But I think this year, in fairness, certainly when we was going well, we went through quite a period of time where we was staying quite injury free, and obviously that really, it went well for us and it's helped our form, and certainly something in previous years, that message quite rightly highlights. We have had our injury problems in the past, and myself, I have questioned the training, the conditioning, is that a problem? But I think on the large this year, I don't think it's been abnormal.
No, I think the pitch is probably the elephant in the room when it comes to injuries. But we didn't touch on this earlier, actually, and I seen someone mention it. Ultimately, rugby league's only got one insurer now. There's only one insurance company that'll touch rugby league, and clearly incidents of what we've seen at the weekend probably don't help when you're having them discussions about whether renewing. Neil said, year on year, we seem to make a mess of recruitment. Can't remember the last time we had a dominant pack. This year, there's clearly been a cut in budget, which has resulted in a smaller squad. But ensure I have no idea how they managed to do this year on year. I think this year, I think the signing of Dan Murray was a very good one. I think probably what's happened, Langtree was a gamble, and he's played okay in the game. He's played okay in the games that he's managed to play, but ultimately he's playing with a shoulder problem, and he might not play again now. That was a bit of a gamble that I suppose you could argue they've had 10 or 11 games out of him. Gregson's clearly got a shoulder issue now that'll need to be managed. I think probably what's exacerbated the situation is that we've not talked about Will Talik, who left. Ant Walker's left. So yeah, you had a small squad, but you've lost two forwards. Yeah, you'll say that Brogan's in there now, but you were a bit like, well, were they short anyway? It almost feels like instead of the squad growing throughout the season, it's almost like it's getting small. It's contracting in some ways.
Yeah, and like I say, I think that goes hand in hand with my point I was making earlier with the fans, getting frustrated at times where these permanent departures are leaving and we're not bringing any permanent signings in, because whatever the philosophy and the decision is behind it, that's absolutely fine. Players move on, and if players don't want to be here, 110%, I agree, then it's probably maybe best not to have them around if there's any question marks over their effort that they're going to bring in. But for me, you've got to make sure something is coming in the other way through the door before you let that happen. And unfortunately, what happened to Lewis Brogan, it is an injury. But at the same time, he could have been recalled on that loan as well. We've seen that happen before, and you are running that risk. And when you get to the business end of the season, which is past the halfway point, that is when you're going to pick up more injuries because players are more fatigued. You're playing, certainly at the back end of the year, you're coming up against the better sides again. If you're going to be in the mix for the playoffs, you're going to be playing the better side, so you're going to get more physical games. So yeah, you need a bigger squad, and at the moment, quite clearly, for whatever reason, it isn't big enough at the moment.
So it remains to be seen what happens with the squad, whether we do see any permanent signings. It's probably more likely that we'll see some loan signings. I'd be very surprised if we don't see any ahead of the game against Dewsbury. Expect maybe to see one or two from Warrington as well. Thanks, Mike, as always, for your company, and thanks everyone for listening and also for your comments as well. Please do leave a review on the podcast platform you listen to us, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, radio, wherever you listen to. It'd be good to get your comments, and we'll give you a shout out or respond to your comments next week. Please do also find us on Facebook, Widnes Rugby League Fans Facebook page and at Widnes Rugby on Twitter or X or whatever they're calling it these days. And then a final thank you to Mike himself for persuading me to bring it back, Mike. It's been good the last few weeks, and had a few people come and see me at the game on Sunday and say that they were enjoying it, so that's always good. My dad was quite happy because somebody actually went up to him and asked him if I was any relation to him. Which, if you've seen my dad, you do well to realise that I wasn't related to him because we look quite similar.
Yeah.
Thanks to you personally for that, Mike.
Oh no, honestly, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it, and I think you just touched up on it there. I've had a few people come up to me at games as well, saying they're really enjoying it, or they're listening to it at work. So long may that continue. And like we've been saying in previous episodes, if there's any questions, any topics people want to get covered, send the messages in, and we'll look to do it.
I was getting heckled actually while I was waiting for my Lion Bar because I mentioned that in last week's. I did tweet a picture because there was actually toffee crisps in the bag this week for the first time. Maybe they couldn't get enough. I did have a Lion Bar. There was enough Lion Bars, fortunately for me, for have one. But yeah, Swinton toffee crisp doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
It doesn't. I mean, to be fair, James, like I was going to say, how did you enjoy it? Because you did say it was going to be the best part of
best part
of the game. It probably wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was great at the time because it was 12-0. So it was 12-0, and I was eating the Lion Bar. It certainly peaked at that point of the afternoon, I would say. But yeah, I quite like the visits to Haywood Road. Obviously, it's not a massive trek to get to. It's fairly well appointed. You can get some food, whatever, and the weather always seems to be quite good whenever you go there, which, given it's Manchester, is quite odd, really. But hey ho. Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next week.